You could be wiser as an educated advisor. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, documentation is the first line of defense, part 3 in our series on best practices for financial professionals with attorney Elia Lirma, all here on Let's Get Down to Business. Welcome to the third segment, Elia.
Hi, Steve.
You know, Elia, when I think about documentation, and listen, we have applications, whether it's securities, whether it's insurance, I can tell you right now, everybody hates the paperwork. We hate it, detest it. And now we're talking about protecting our practices with more paperwork, more documentation. And the first time, I remember when we interviewed the first time, and we talked about the letter of engagement. And I was like, what? You know, here's what we'll do, here's what the consumer will do, what the client will do, right? We're just spelling out our services, what you should expect, having expectations written in the document. That was a fear of God moment for me, and people that saw that show thought the same. Hey, we need to start doing this. So they went on the internet, and there's a lot of nice sample document of engagement. Now, that's just one thing. So let's talk about documentation, because it is your first line of defense. Talk about why it's so important.
Well, it's important because what you say is not necessarily what your client hears. And just as my professor in communications in college said, the problem with communication is the illusion that it has occurred. And so when the rising claim is negligent misrepresentation, that you didn't tell your client about this product or how it would perform or what their expectations should be, and then you have no documentation, then you've got a real problem, because those negligent misrepresentation claims are going to come down to what did the client understand. And then if they start to look at what did you recommend, and perhaps it was not the best product or the best recommendation for this particular client, you've got some real problems if it's not been evidenced. And it shouldn't be a weighty obligation. I think a lot of people have this fear that, you know, you have to have the insurance contract that we talked about in the last segment, you know, it's 50 or 70 pages. And documentation now comes down to a lot of different types of things. It can be short memos and faxes, it can be emails, it can be text messages and voice messages. So long as there's an actual documented record that you just print out, keep in your file, or you keep an electronic version of that, and that counts. It can be very simple. If you're somebody who likes to text, then make a habit of downloading and storing text messages and keeping them in appropriate client files. That kind of minimal effort will save you, again, a lot of headaches down the road.
Now, consumers watching as well, you know, we should keep our files. If we're sending something to our agent or our advisor, we should keep a kind of a running file on our communication as well. This whole thing about engagement letter, you know, when you first came on the set a year or so ago, I was really surprised, because I'm thinking, how many people do this? And I cannot believe how much. I've never really sat down and said, here's what I'll do and my expectations, and what I'm looking for you to do and your expectations, and do we agree with that, and are you willing to sign that? To me, that's a kind of a cornerstone of, especially when you're dealing with a first-time prospect.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it goes back to what we talked about in the prior segment in terms of understanding what everyone's expectations are. And if they're expecting you to be more available to them than you typically offer, that's a way that you're going to see that there's a disconnect, and this may not be the best prospect for your particular...
You're okay with outsourcing people that really you don't want to hassle because the maintenance issues may be big.
Well, and because it will result in unhappy clients down the road, and unhappy clients are the ones who bring the claims against you. And so if you're not taking those proactive measures, and you're not taking the responsibilities seriously that they're setting out for you, they're giving you the flags that they're going to be kind of a high maintenance client. They may require more than your typical 2 years, twice a year communication, and you're discounting that, then you've invited more problems. So as I typically say, I'm not doing them any favors if I take on a client who I don't believe I can satisfy their needs, because that's not my communication style. There's lots of attorneys, lots of good qualified attorneys who may be more suited to handling that kind of client. So those are things that should enter your mind. You may still opt to keep that client in your practice, but at some point, you know, you're going to have to make the acknowledgement that you're going to have to bump up your game a little bit if you don't want to have problems. And that's really what we're talking about, is while these may not rise to the level of negligence or actually result in a claim that has to be paid out by your errors and omissions coverage, a client who brings a claim or files a complaint, those are things that that you're going to have to deal with, and they're problematic, and they're time consuming, and they're stressful. And if you can avoid them at the outset, then why wouldn't you?
I want to do to the documents. You just said, text. I'm saving my texts now. I'm saving my voicemail. Audio now. We got to do audio files. We're saving our email. Fax is communication. Our letter of engagement. Any kind of communication that we've talked about, and maybe even kicking it back live when you're with the client, saying, "Now tell me what you think I just said," to hear and clarify, kind of regurgitate what I just said. But now, how long should I keep this stuff? We just had a shredding event in Scottsdale where you can bring all your papers, and the city does this for you. It's a $3 donation. It's great. The line is out the door, and I was like, no, I got there 15 minutes before, and I was still number 45 car or whatever. I'm thinking, what goes in this box here of my practice, right, as an advisor? What should I shred? How long should I keep this stuff?
Investment products, it's difficult, right, because you're dealing with a period of time. Those types of things may vary depending on the client that you're talking about. And I'm not saying keep every single communication. But certainly you want to keep the ones that are substantive, where there are significant changes, where someone has retired and maybe changed financial products, or their objectives for their portfolio have been modified significantly. So those are the times you really want to document and keep track of that documentation. I would say hard copy documentation is really falling out of vogue for most people. And if you have someone that you trust in terms of electronic storage, that can be very valuable, because then you can consolidate the information that you need.
A lot of stuff's in the cloud now. I mean, it just is.
Well, and I think it's really, really important to understand what your clients are retaining. I've had several claims recently, not in the financial industry, but one real estate matter, where the text messages that were being sent between the two parties have become very crucial pieces of evidence. And so those are the things that also matter. You have to know what your client might be saving. Are they saving your communications? Are they saving your promotional materials? It's very rare that people do, but if they are, and you've made representations in your text messages, or you've dissuaded them from, coming in this time for their regular financial yearly audit or something, and that can be misinterpreted as you being uninvolved in the active participation that you held yourself out as having, then that's a problem. So if you've been sending text messages that say, "Don't worry about this, I'll handle it," and then you didn't, your client may still hang on to those. And I am shocked. I'm a person who typically would receive messages and then delete them because it was taking up room on my phone. But I have had cases in the professional context and also just in negligence claims where text messages were kept for 4 or 5 years. So if your clients are keeping them that long, you should be thinking of keeping them at least as long. Or I think a safe bet is to follow what most attorneys do and keep for 6 years, because usually you're going to know if there's a claim that's out there within that time period.
Well, that's twice as long as the IRS. Usually they tell us 3 years is good, but I'm thinking of everybody that I saw on that line, the shredding, and I'm thinking, is that clients' things? I'm not shredding any clients. I'm shredding things that I've had too long. But I'm looking at one last thing, because I'm always trying to say, what do I preserve? What am I going to preserve here? What do I need to retrieve if I need evidence to defend myself, or if I'm a consumer, to bring to the table to say, I think I've been injured here? So that's always, which one do I keep? You're trying to figure out, the old stuff, maybe it's okay, shreddable, but what do I really keep?
Well, again, you may have to look at how substantive that communication, a small minor email reflecting a modest change to the overall plan, you can probably chuck it after just a few years. But if it's something substantive, somebody's passed away and there's details involving succession plans for a business, or there's important information, those are things you may want to hang on to, because they can be pretty important.
I have to say, I don't get involved in this too often, but one of the clients died, and I was given a copy years ago. Here's the will, here's the trust work, here's the authority to dispose of my health issues, here's the person going to make the point call on that, custody of children, blah, blah, blah. And somehow between the time that I received this years back and the time this person died, they had redone their will. So all of a sudden we have a completely brand new set of docs, right, and a whole new protocol, and it was the most messiest thing I've ever been involved in. And we had to just not only walk away from everything that was ever done before that time, but then we had to say, okay, this isn't the right count. This isn't the right number. We had to sort through it. And it almost got out of hand and people were getting angry. So it's very helpful to document, to try to really keep it in mind, especially now. Most people are okay with the cloud. You know, they're pretty okay with it. You know, you don't have to keep the hard copy because it's somewhere up in the stratosphere of a cumulus cloud, apparently. So those are the things we're looking for to keep. So when I'm suggesting to consumers, especially, keep the things that really matter. Not the, hey, I'll see you tonight at the dinner. I'm looking at, hey, you said this. Is this what you meant, right? You just said that thing, then I'll end with this for our segment. What did your professor say about communication?
The most dangerous thing about communication is the illusion that it has occurred.
Wow. Don't forget to watch our next segment on financial misconduct and evidence, part 4 of our series on best practices for financial professionals. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or your compliance officer. And don't forget, you can also subscribe to my consumer show, Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. Daily content you can post on your website, social media accounts, database distribution. I'm Steve Savant. Thanks for watching.